We were on.
Yes, we are. Well, witchcraft is a complex but lived reality in Ghana. There is obviously a high belief in the existence of witchcraft. A 2010 NCC study conducted on witchcraft and human rights of women in Ghana attempted a few definitions for witchcraft, which I find fascinating. In the research, respondents defined witchcraft as use of spiritual powers to harm or kill people, the act of seeing into a person's future and manipulating him or her negatively, the act of using spiritual powers to appear in a person's dream, or the exhibition of extreme antisocial behavior. So just a few of the definitions that came out in that research back in 2010. Assaults on people accused of witchcraft have increased over the period. Many of them have been physically harmed. The latest is a heartbreaking video of a 90-year-old woman who was lynched near Salaga in the Savannah region, Ekia Dante. And I must say that the video is one that's very disturbing. You may not have that mindset for it. Apologies there. Ekia Dante was slapped, kicked, and caned on Thursday after being accused of witchcraft by a supposed soothsayer. Questioning that we are asking is, can we ever eliminate these dangerous superstitions, since this is not the first time? And who protects those accused of witchcraft? And why is it that people in positions and wealth are not likely to be accused of witchcraft, but women, mostly old ladies who are widowed with no social and economic standing, are accused of witchcraft and in some cases banned from their villages? What is the legal justification of being tagged as a witch and banned as a result, or threatened with lynching? And to what extent are the human rights of such persons upheld? So plenty questions that we're asking ourselves, and that's why we've raised these very important personalities so we can discuss this matter thoroughly. If you've got questions and comments, you can join us later on with your comments as well. So let's just introduce our guests who are joining us live on Zoom. Madam Josephine Nkrumah is chairperson of the NCCE. Good morning to you, ma'am. Good to see you.
Yeah, good morning. Just unmute for us. Madam Nkrumah, please unmute for us.
I'm not muted.
Yeah.
Okay.
We've also got Diana Adiko, who is a gender activist. Good morning, Diana. Good to see you again.
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, good morning.
And Mr. Joseph Whittal is Commissioner of SHRASH. Good morning to you, sir. It's a pleasure to have all of you join us for this conversation.
Thank you.
Yeah, great.
So you've all seen the video, or you've read the story, because not everybody has the heart to watch the video, but you've probably seen the story. So let's just take quick reactions from you. Perhaps I'll start with you, the gentleman, Mr. Joseph Whittal.
Yeah, thank you, Mama V. It took me time to watch this video. The first time it came out, I refused to watch it because it's just man's inhumanity to man. In this case, women inhumanity to women. And it's heartbreaking, and I wish this doesn't happen in our dear country.
Madam Nkrumah.
Hi, good morning again. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Loud and clear.
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. Truth be told, I'm only just watching the video because I totally refused to look at it. I was given a graphic description verbally by someone, and I thought, I just can't bring myself to watch it. But it is sad that in this time, in a democratic dispensation, with all the human rights protection we have in our country, we should still see this, considering a lot of work that has gone into this canker, traditional canker, over the years. It's amazing that it's coming up again, and I believe very strongly that we need to quickly put in the necessary interventions to firstly bring justice to this woman who passed away, bring the perpetrators to book, and begin to engage the communities very seriously on the repercussions of this and the consequences and penalties as well.
Diana, your initial reaction?
I think both panelists have said it. It's gruesome. It was painful to watch. It was heartbreaking. But then I thought, this is what, for years, for over 100 years in Ghana, and probably around Africa and the world, people have gone through when they are accused of being witches. And most often it will be women. This is what has happened over time. This is how people lost their lives. Today, the difference is there are cameras for it to be recorded, for the public to react. And it's heartbreaking. And to even think that we continue to do this now, after all the work we believe we have done, tells us that there's a long way to cover. So my heart was torn into pieces to watch that video.
And I remember the first time I went to a witch camp, it was back then, the Gambaga, it was very famous at the time, and a lot of work seemed to have been done. But how is the issue of the socio-cultural mindset of the communities related to its pervasiveness or existence still? Let me pose that question to you, Madam Josephine Nkrumah.
Well, first, I think the Constitution assures us our right to exercise our cultural, religious, whatever preferences. But again, it is subject to the law. It is subject to the Constitution. And I think in this particular regard, it is subject to the rights and the protection of every individual in this country that says our human dignity is inviolable. And to that extent, no matter what your sociocultural background is, dignity being violable as enshrined in the Constitution and as assured to all of us, particularly when it comes to witchcraft, because it is something that has been gender-based. The rights of women particularly comes into play, the rights of the vulnerable in society, and the fact that they are meant to be protected rather than the discrimination that we've seen, rather than the inhumane treatment, and to this extent, the fact that they're being killed. They're taking away life because of sociocultural preferences, and that is unacceptable in the Constitution as the fundamental law of the land.
Madam Adiko, if you take a look at how communities have been able to come together because women have played a key role, how is this at the core of dehumanizing women in our cultural setting, particularly with this, even though we've had several instances over the years?
Yeah, again, this, you are right. It brings our attention to a conversation that probably we all have been shying away from. This is a manifestation this time around in a community, a small community, probably that has a lot more indigenous people than it has migrants. And we see what happened. And as I said initially, this is not different from what has happened in the past. And this is the same reason you mentioned witch camp. As a matter of fact, the concept of the witch camp was birthed in response to things like this. In the past, when an individual is diagnosed or identified, in quote, as a witch, there was every effort to lynch these persons or to harm them. The option they had was to run to, and this is in the northern region, which is now the Savannah region, was for them to run to a camp where they are protected from harm. And in addition to that, they are also diagnosed, there are rituals that are performed to determine whether they are innocent of the accusation or they are guilty. Most often than not, they are found guilty. And the persons who lead the camps, which are usually in the regions, the camps we had in Ghana, we call them the Tidanis, or the male chiefs. They perform some acts for them in the name of exercising their powers from them or taming their powers such that they are less harmful to society. So the camps were actually introduced as a way to prevent the communities from killing the accused victims. And there, again, there are ways to determine how somebody is a witch, and it's very interesting. One of the ones that I find most bizarre is that if they show up in your dreams. So if I sleep tonight and I see you, Roland, in my dream, I can come to your office this morning and accuse you of witchcraft, attempt to attack and cause harm, and probably your only option will be to run to the nearest witch camp to be saved. And at that place, there will be an activity that will determine that you are not a witch or you are a wizard, and then you are going to be kept there for the rest of your life if you want to be safe. So that's how it plays out. And there are so many other things. And it's interesting, you see Madam Nkrumah talked about the intersections. I mean, the fact that it's women, and you see the certain intersections, you see that it intersects very strongly with age. Very, very often, it's older persons. Very, very often, those old persons should be female, and very often, it ties very closely with their economic status. They often are poor, and they often are uneducated, or they are not affiliated with the mighty and powerful in societies. They often must be people who probably cannot have children, or have not had children before, whose children have died. They probably must be person whose husbands are dead, or they're people who they think have very odd life that does not tie in with what society does. And that's where at the community level, but I think as we go on, we would also discuss how religion plays a key role in what is happening as our prayer comes and our healing comes. So the Islam religion kind of identifies with witchcraft accusation. The Christian religion does very strongly, and the traditional religion as well. So all these religions come together. They're looking for people who are the cause of lack of progress in society. They are looking for reasons why we are retarded as communities and as countries. Therefore, they will have to find somebody, and that somebody has to look like Ekwe Adente.
And then, Mr. Wita, how has the law, our constitution, the criminal code that we have, been able to interface with this, knowing that this is a socio-cultural phenomenon that also would need the law to play a key role in bringing communities of perpetrators to book in a one-stop shop, so to speak? Mr. Wita, did you hear me? Can you please unmute? It looks like we lost the sound there. Mr. Wittal?
Right.
Okay, great.
Yes, I had just the last part of
it.
And,
okay, so basically we have the law. The law is supposed to be enforced, but we also know that it's a socio-cultural phenomenon. How have we been able to interface that over the years up to this point?
I must say that unfortunately we haven't been able to do that much to the disappointment of human rights activists, because these lynchings and co take place all over the communities there. We have monitored about 6 camps. Before they even get to the camp, some are actually killed, some are banished, sent out of their villages as to where they will end up. That is left to them. And the law doesn't seem to occupy us. We have policemen, we have police stations, we have all kinds of security agencies there, but unfortunately, it appears the vulnerable persons who are accused of witchcraft are not in a position to be protected. And so it is something that we have looked on. The space of the state in those villages is lost, and I think we need to really rethink how we protect these vulnerable people.
So I just want to pick up from there and still stay with you, Mr. Wittal. What has failed? Because we've got Shraj, for instance, we've got the NCCE. I was just referring to a research that was done by the NCCE back in 2010. We know what the issue is. We've got the laws. What is preventing us from dealing with it?
Well, you have to see the angle from which we all operate as state institutions. I'm sure Josephine will come on her part, so I'll concentrate on mine. We are to protect the rights of people. But when it comes to law enforcement, and in this case, lynching enters into a realm of criminality. And so it is the duty of the Ghana Police Service, who have the responsibility for investigating and prosecuting crime, to do that. All that we can do is to educate the people, the communities, all the people who are the stakeholders involved in this, as to what they ought to do to stay within the principles of the Constitution. And it's not the position of the Commission to go ahead and take matters of that nature to the court, because we don't have prosecutorial powers. So those who have it are expected to do that. We can bring that to their attention, but not beyond that. And that is why I said the space, when it comes to investigations and prosecutions at the village level, in the case of women, or, well, let me say, persons accused of witchcraft, that space is very empty. And it's about time our police service, our security agencies, wake up to the reality that protection is not about only going about making sure that criminals armed robbers do not enter homes to take their property, but protecting the physical integrity of the people in the community, which includes these people alleged to be accused of witchcraft. So yes, we have our role, but there are other state actors who need to come in.
Madam Nkrumah, what's the missing link? Because you do a lot of education. I remember there was a project to close down the camps, even though not all the camps have been closed. So we do understand what the issues are. What's missing?
I think Joe has actually said it. The social interventions on the part of state institutions, on the part of NGOs, I think has been rigorous over the years. And in fact, if you go back in time, you'd see that there has been a drastic reduction in the occurrences like this. Why it is rearing its ugly head again, we're trying to get to understand the issues. But I think what Joe said is very true. The criminal dimension to this, the law enforcement to this, and the equal projection of the consequences of this has been perhaps not as amplified as it ought to be, in order for people to realize that there are real consequences for this. There are penalties, and that there are laws that actually go to punish you if you're a perpetrator of such an act, or if you abuse the human rights of another individual. So I think we need to step up our law enforcement. We need to engage more with our law enforcement agencies in the districts and in the communities where these have occurred, in order to understand the criminal dimension to this and the legal implications thereof.
Diana, monitoring what people have been saying, the reactions to this tragic incidents, it sounds surprising that there were a lot of observers, but there hasn't been any arrests. And I wonder if you also hold that same view, that this thing happened on Thursday and we haven't arrested anybody.
Yes, I do. I absolutely hold that view. And I am concerned and I am disturbed. If we SHRAG, NCTE, NGO, civil society continue to create awareness on these issues. Take, for example, you train a child that if you play with fire or if you touch fire, fire would burn you. And you keep repeating that message. And somehow this child keeps tempting fire and playing with fire and doesn't get burnt. What happens to your message? If we keep telling communities and societies and families that you cannot harm people, violate their rights and get away with it. There are laws in this country that does not accept it, yet they do it and they get away with it. Do you think that they are ever going to stop? Take, for example, the issue of Major Mahama. Up to date, even though all of us saw videos of what happened to him, I think to date we don't have people who have been convicted of the crime. We know a few people are still in court, but that's taking way too long. What that does, it breeds an environment of impunity. It breeds, it doesn't allow people to follow their conscience, and it makes all the education comes to naught. It needs to be a blend between education and enforcement of the law. If you tell people there is a law, that does not necessarily speak to whether the witchcraft exists or not, and that's a very tricky place to go. So the law has insulated itself from that. But the law says whether or not you identify somebody as a witch or wizard, it is not in your hands and place to harm or violate that person. That is clear. Just as I would not in my home in the morning begin to slap people because I don't like the size of their nose, so you cannot also slap another person because you think that person is a witch. As simple as that. No state has tried, at least in Ghana, to tell Ghanaians that witchcraft does not exist or we do not believe in witchcraft. It is up to you to decide what you believe in and how that has an effect on you. But what is important is we need to understand that you just cannot rise in the morning, pick on someone, declare they are witches, and destroy their life. It is not right. It is absolutely not right. And if this particular one that has gone viral is not used as a basis to set examples, I am sorry, this is going to get worse. A few years ago, we had conversation about how similar persons were treated at prayer camps. Similar persons were treated at healing camps. And the fact that there's also some connection with people's mental health and how the rest of us decide to describe mental health and translate that into witchcraft possession. And so if we have worked so hard to change the mode of operation in healing camps and prayer camps, yet we allow the broader community to pull out somebody in broad day and kill her and not take actions till now, all we are saying is go ahead, Now,
we do know, Mr. Wittal, that your agency, through your article that establishes you, mandates you to investigate some of these actions. Over the years, my observation perhaps will be that unless these are brought to your notice formally within the complaint, then perhaps we don't get to see that. Has that been the case? Or perhaps beyond the 6 numbers that you've reported, you've gone into the communities and found that these are abuses that need readily some assistance of the law to bring perpetrators to book?
Yeah, thank you. Beyond the investigations event, we work closely with some NGOs such as Action Aid in the footprint areas, Patinga, Gambaga, and all those areas that were mentioned. And so we were able, our focus now is not only in terms of investigations, but how do we get the communities prepared to allow reintegration of these alleged witches by enabling the push communities to accept them when they come back, and the pool communities to also understand that it is not a business for the Tindana or whoever is in charge of the camp, but these are human beings and they ought to be given their freedom to live like all of us. And so we do a cross-sectoral activity when it comes to the protection of the rights of witches. Investigations, we do community preparation for reintegration and a number of other things, even including working with NGOs to enable support, microfinancing to be given to the communities. Actually, my commission is part of the reintegration committee of the witches camps in the northern region.
And for the NCC, I know education is important, but it is because we want people to be conversant with what people's civil liberties are. The Constitution rightly states in Article 17 that everybody is equal before the law. Why is it that we haven't, over the years, been able to bring the perpetrators to book? Even though in some of those jurisdictions, we have police stations or police commands, personnel just close by.
Well, Roland, I think we've touched on this already, but like you said, there's been a lot of education. Mr. Joe Whittle has explained to you the level of engagement that has gone on. And Dinah has worked very closely with these communities and as well as other NGOs in the various communities. But the key thing is, beyond education and beyond the sensitization, what then happens? We really need to perhaps engage more with the security agencies and let them know that without them plugging into this space where they ensure that they're committed to
We seem to have lost the sound connection to Madam Nkrumah. Let's see if that can come back. But there's another issue of a fundamental social culture. I mean, to think about the fact that, and this is not the law. This is just a society where a lot of people are looking on while something like this happens to a 90-year-old. So fundamentally, is there something wrong with us as a people? I mean, even if you don't know that there's a law that's against lynching or harming someone, but for every one of those people that we saw in the video to stand there and just watch, there must be something fundamentally wrong with us as a people. What have you identified? I'll start with you, Dinah.
I think it is because they are convinced that she's guilty, and not the priestess or the person who called her out as a witch was actually trying to find solution to their delayed progress as a community. So then they identified her as a cause for the lack of progress and lack of development for them collectively as a community, and obviously individually for their sicknesses, for their lack of jobs, for their poor crop yielding, and all of that. So they have collectively agreed that she is the enemy, and the enemy needs to be gotten rid of. So you notice that not only is the act of witchcraft accusation persistent, it is also tied to mob actions or mob justice, if you should. I mean, I don't like justice because I don't see justice in this, but mob actions. So collectively, they've come together and they have agreed that this is our enemy, and how do we get rid of it? So in their minds at the time, they felt, and I would not be surprised if there were even her direct family members in that crowd who also thought that, oh yes, she's the reason why as individuals in our family, our marriages are not working, we are not able to have children, we are not getting jobs, we are not traveling abroad. So yes, get rid of her. So we need to, and these things are strongly rooted in religion or in faith. So we need to find a way, whilst we are talking about let the justice system prevail to seek justice, and that would also be one way of preventing, we need to connect with the mindset of people and try to diagnose or understand why and how we work around the issue of witchcraft accusation and open up the spaces. Why are the things that happen around us happen? If, for example, your health is failing, has it got to do with lifestyle? Has it got to do with the fact that you do not take your medical appointments? Or does it got to do with the fact that people don't even have hospitals to go to? So they have to find other ways to understand what is happening around them. But if you move it from the community level, most of the people standing there also think they have individual experiences. We know of people who think their stepchildren, for example, are witches. And most often they are female children. We know people who think their stepmothers, their mothers, and their mother-in-laws. I think top on the list are mother-in-laws. They are the #1 biggest witches in the world. You can't take that from them. And then, so those mindsets continue to exist. And we are people who live in so much fear. We live in fear of things around us. If a fly hops by your nose twice, you begin to think that this might be someone who is on an errand to know your business. People sleep in their room and they can't make calls because they think that they are hearing the spirit of something hearing. So there's a very, very strong belief in witchcraft or supernatural forces as a country, that if we want to ignore that and have conversation about accusation, we may be approaching the issue wrongly. We probably need to begin to, I remember in 2014, the Ministry of Gender, at the time when I worked there as a technical advisor, had a national dialogue on the issue about witchcraft accusation. And we moved it away from the northern, now Savannah region, and we looked at it as a country holistically. We connected it to mental health issues. When women are beginning to experience menopausal signs and symptoms, people begin to interpret that as witchcraft manifestations. So we opened the conversations very wide, that what is it that makes us confident that people indeed are witches, and then move it to what do you do when they are witches. So we are stuck somewhere, and we, unfortunately, our religious systems feed off that. They call people out in church and say you are a witch, and they give them the microphone to accept and declare the things that they do that make them witch. Somebody will say, yes, they are witches, but I think there's something wrong with that kind of approach. But worse off, you call people and say, your mother is a witch, she's the cause of your inability to have children. And they go back home and they're ready to fight their mothers, mother-in-law. So, and we have said again, the intersection with gender is very strong. Very few men are wizards. In fact, when men grow older, we see them as wise men. They are the wisdom pot of the house or the community. And women grow older, they are the witches and the source of harm for our community.
And it's interesting how we have our grandmothers who are not necessarily living in the villages, who are pretty old. I mean, we celebrate them as grandmothers and great-grandmothers, and nobody does the accusations. But I want to ask you on the back of what Dinah said, Mr. Whittal, what's the legal justification for somebody tagging another person as a witch, either in church or anywhere else?
Of course, there is no legal justification whatsoever. No matter your belief, you cannot project your belief in a way that would bring about harm to somebody. You can't do that. So what has been going on in the churches, in the communities, and all those places, by people labeling people as witches, and for that matter, something must be done to them, they are actually abettors of crime. That ought not to happen.
But we've seen that happen even on live television. They broadcast what they do. We see it.
Exactly, Mama V. That is why I'm saying that we need to begin to reconstruct what we understand by the protection of people. You should protect people even from harmful, hateful language that can lead to violence. So it is not enough for us to coil our hands and say, oh, but they are practicing their religion, so it is for them to do what they want. No, 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 no. They cannot practice their religion in such a way that they either by the words they use, they create harm for somebody or invite harm to be done to somebody. That should not happen. That should not happen. But I think our major problem as a society is that we let me put it this way. It appears we are so tied to our culture and tradition that we still need to do a lot to break that bond between us as a people and our so-called culture and tradition. And this is a culture and tradition sometimes which is not very helpful to the people, certain people, like women in particular. We are talking about the system of patriarchy. All these show that in a community where things happen and there must be a cause, it is an old lady who is seen as the cause of the problem. We try to find a cause from within our patriarchal system, protecting men and the rich and the powerful, and putting all the blame for the ills of society on the poor, the vulnerable, and on women. These are things we need to break. These are structures we need to break, but it takes time to do that. And it's about time our security agencies begin to show by example. I'm sure if we prosecute 3, 4, 5 to 10 people for what they have done in terms of lynching witches, it will serve as a lesson. People will sit up. Why should chiefs be protected if they've invited people to come into a community to solve a problem of, some ills that are befalling the community, and that leads to the death of somebody? The causation is direct. We need to begin to appreciate that the systems that we have in our communities are also part of the problem.
We're going to be activating the phone lines because we want people to join this conversation as well. So get ready to give us a call on 030221169102. Madam Nkrumah, hopefully we have a better connection in terms of the sound. Two issues, the latest with the action that the state is taking is the fact that, and it's been reported in the news today, that the IGP has dispatched homicide team to hunt the killers and also put a reward of 2,000 Ghana cedis on any person that comes forward to give information that leads to the arrest of the people who murdered Madam Eke-Adente. But if you're accused of being a witch, either you're called out by a priest in the village or you're called out in church, what kind of support is there for you? I mean, at that point when it happens, when you're doing the education, what can people do? Where can I turn to?
Wow. Okay. So I think firstly, Dinah alluded to the fact about the creation even of these so-called witch camps. It was literally perhaps a place of refuge for witches who had somewhere to go to. That is not to say the witch camps themselves were ideal, because there's a lot of research that shows that the witch camps were in terrible or deplorable states, and they had real issues with life and living in there. And beyond that, even, we need to look at the extended family around some of these witches, where livelihoods are truncated. If you're a mother and perhaps you had children, it meant that your children most likely have to drop out of school. So the dimensions of this are far-reaching. But where do you go when this happens? Granted, the Constitution gives you or protects you from these things, but these are the real issues that we need to begin to ask ourselves. What kind of social welfare interventions do we have that allow for the victims of such beliefs access to some level of protection, some level of care, and ensuring that they live in dignity, they have a livelihood, they are self-sufficient, and where it is physical or medical or mental, they have the state to grant them the needed medical attention to resolve these things. I think we have the structures. Question is whether the structures work. And sadly, in communities such as what happened in Eke-Adente's community, even though perhaps on paper the structures are there, they don't work. Or you would even find that sometimes where the structures work, the people themselves who work there hold similar beliefs.
Yeah.
Recently, we had a situation where there was an issue of, I think, defilement of a young child. And the police who was supposed to be investigating this said, well, this is a matter between two, and mentioned the ethnic, the ethnic groupings of these people. And so I don't want to get involved. And in the middle of this was a young child who had been raped or defiled by someone. But the real issue then is, how are our social welfare and social intervention structures working? I don't think they have been properly equipped to carry out their role. And I very much doubt that in that community you will even find one there.
Okay.
So this big conversation is how we begin, or we continue this, tied to this is how we continue this conversation by roping in what we consider as the loopholes and finding ways to address this. I'm sure in the past we have, but perhaps it hasn't been sustained. But this is really an important time for us to begin to bring a certain roadmap of closure to such events and change mindset. And I think we also need to discuss the issue of development. At the heart of this really is development.
Yeah, and growth. Yeah.
If it was a community where they had all the facilities, people were working, you wouldn't find as much of this. But as my co-speakers have said, you would find that this is happening in a community where there's a lot of vulnerable groups, and they are more to support.
Right. We have to go on to the phone lines. We have from Tamale, Hakim. Hakim, good morning to you. Hakim?
Yes, good morning.
Good morning. Please, what will be your contribution to our discussion? I'm sure you've been following.
Yeah, a lot. The issue has to do with deterrence and culture. With the cultural aspect, I can tell you without doubt that over 90% of us in the North here believe in these things. Irrespective of the person, it doesn't matter the level of the person's education. PhD holders, people who are enlightened, people who should have known better, all of them have believed that there exist these witches. So first of all, let's look at the education and mindset of our people. Because no matter what we do, if the people still believe that there exist witches, these things will continue. And the other thing has to do with enforcement. I am highly disappointed in the Ghana Police Service. There are issues happening, and within 24 hours, corporate or suspects are rounded out. In this particular case, how is it taking so long for the police service to effect arrest? You see, if anybody condones criminality, that person is as well a criminal. There is a chief in that particular community. What happened to the chief? Because if the chief knew that what they were doing, if the chief hadn't sanctioned that particular execution, it wouldn't have.
Well, Hakim, we can't go there because we don't know if the chief was personally involved or not. But we appreciate the comments that you've made. Really, really important there. The fact that, and we all go to church. We all have our beliefs. There are witches and wizards, except that maybe we haven't been called out, so it hasn't happened to us. But that's the reality. The society believes in this witchcraft phenomenon. So how do we stop something that we believe, or how do we prevent people from taking further actions from something that we all believe as a society? I guess that's where the hurdle is. And I don't know if anybody wants to jump into it, but Abu is joining us from WA. After Abu, I'll come back to you, and then you can have a say on that. Abu, good morning.
Hello, good morning.
Yes, sir. Thanks for joining us. You're on air. Let's hear you.
Yes. This issue, I don't know whether this is the first time people are hearing it. There have been a lot of issues like this going on.
Well, this is not the first time. We're dealing with this particular issue with the 90-year-old.
It's just that this is the one that has been captured on TV. That's why people are seeing it to be something big.
Okay, Abu, I think I'll have to end you here. This is not the first time we're dealing with this matter. We're dealing with a specific issue of a 90-year-old. If we can be more specific and also appreciate that we've been talking about this matter for a very long time, I think it will be very helpful to all of us. Let's just hit it right there on the head. So can you attempt answering the question that I just posed? It's something that we, as a society, we all believe in. How do we get rid of it? Dinah?
Well, yes. Mama, it's really difficult, especially when a mindset is tied to faith or has religious ground, whether it's called traditional religion or whatever. It's really complex to deal with. That's why as a state, the state probably has approached it at multiple levels. The first level is we do not quarrel with you that you believe they are witches. We do not dispute the fact that you believe they are witches. It's okay to believe they are witches. But you should find other ways of dealing with that other than picking stones and stoning them, other than setting their homes ablaze, other than killing them. That is not allowed. So if you do that, you've offended the law, and the law will kick in. That is why it is very depressing that these people seems to be maybe getting away with it. And that is when it makes a whole nonsense of everything that you say that is not allowed, because you said it's not allowed, I did it, and I get away with it. We come back to point zero. However, we also need to, we talked earlier about development and the strong intersection between poverty and low education rate, and the rate at which accusation comes in and the rate at which people react. For those who are a bit more educated, their response to the same accusation that we all believe in is different than those who do not know a lot more about what the law say about this and that. So it becomes a problem. And the accusation is even more rampant in places where they can't explain the kind of health issues they are dealing with. They can't explain the kind of child or infant mortality that prevails. They believe that indeed there's that woman who has a black pot in some corner who is putting the children's neck in water spiritually and killing them. So if you reduce the mortality rate in those communities, you reduce the suspicion rate, and you build a little bit more trust amongst themselves, and they can live meaningful life.
Okay,
so
thank you.
We need to address all those other things before we can make, but you just can't call people and say, don't believe in witchcraft, it's not going to work.
Well, thank you. Let's take our last caller, Ryder. Or Reader. Okay, Reader from Tamale. Reader, thanks for joining us. Let's hear you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, with regards to the issue, I think I really agree with what Abdul Hakim from Tamale said. We in the north, and we can also argue that the whole of Ghana believes in this witchcraft system. But looking at it critically also, there has not been any legislative system put in place to cater for how we deal with situations regarding this. We haven't put in place, if you go to a place like Kenya, the constitution has made provision. I remember back about 3 years ago, there was a rule that no witch was allowed to fly above a certain altitude. It means the constitution, they have agreed with its existence, and they have put in place rules that will protect the people in general. But in Ghana, we still adapt to the Western constitution. We treat our society as if we don't have these things within us or among us, and we basically don't put in place rules that would prevent or protect people from these kind of abuses when they are right. I also think that the police service are putting much emphasis on just road traffic and then burglary. They don't concentrate on issues such as this. One of the panelists was stating that people have been abused in churches on live television, and nothing was done about it. This is something that I witness every day. Sometimes I just tune in to watch and then laugh, because you look at it and you know that what this person is saying on live.
It's complete abuse. Well, Rita.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Rita, for your contribution. That he is the last, and it means we have to bring matters to a head. Now, Mr. Whittal, where do we begin from here? Look, we've seen that even as individuals in the security services, in law enforcement, even in this so-called quasi-judicial bodies are even complicit because of the belief we have in our minds. It's from the home. But where do we begin from here, knowing all the things that we've done in the past?
Well, for me, I think the way forward would be, one, can the police begin to re-educate the policemen and women differently beyond preparation for combat as to how to appreciate community problems that constitute a threat to human life and what to do. It's very critical. They are there, they are not just sitting at the police stations and sitting down to take complaints and investigate armed robbery and theft and bananas and others. No. It's also about making sure that we protect the life and integrity of the people in the community. That's how we should be going. For the mindset issue, all of us must begin to appreciate that you cannot, and I must agree, I mean, some of my colleague panelists made it clear that it takes time for belief to change. Even in the UK, they practice witchcraft from the 14th century until the 19th century. And so it took time for them to change. So we are getting gradually there, but we can hasten it by the deterrence that the caller from Tamale said. We need to begin to be more proactive, particularly when law enforcement in the colonial period, through indirect rule, was left in the hands of chiefs in the villages. Now, if you have taken away that power and you still have policemen who see, let me say, opinion leaders and chiefs as some law enforcement, then there's a problem, because they are sitting in conflict, in a conflict situation. They are protecting customary laws that may be, like what we are discussing, inimical to the rights of people, and also at the same time supposed to ensure that justice is delivered in the community. How does that happen? So the police must take their rightful place and make sure that policing goes beyond the normal standard allegations that come to them that they take to court, among others.
Madam Josephine Nkrumah, where do we go from here? I know that education will be critical, but beyond behavioral change, what do we do?
Firstly, we do accept that Ghana is a deeply spiritual nation. I mean, educated and non-educated alike have firm and deep-seated beliefs. But the Constitution is quite clear that your beliefs should not be the reason to cause the indignity of another person, and there are real consequences for it. But I think that Madame Ekua Denteme, her soul rest in peace, her death should not be in vain. In fact, this should really spark and be the catalyst to accelerate the conversation that we are having, to ensure that at the very least, whilst it takes a long time for us to resolve issues of belief, where the law acts as a deterrent, we should act hastily, swiftly, to ensure that perpetrators such as these are brought to book. I think that in itself also sends a signal to communities that no matter what your belief is, if it flouts any law, and particularly flouts the fundamental law of the land, where you cause somebody to suffer, this inhumane act, you dehumanize somebody, then you must face the full rigors of the law. So I would expect that the Ghana Police Service, and I'm happy to hear that the IGP has sent a team there to carry out an investigation. I would hope that this investigation is carried out very quickly, perpetrators are brought to book, and it is made as visible as possible and to serve as a deterrent. That is, we can ensure justice for this woman and ensure that we protect other people in the future.
All right.
We thank you for your time. We thank you for the analysis, the education, the insights that you bring to this conversation. Really, really appreciate it. Madam Josephine Nkrumah, Madam Diana Adiko, Mr. Joseph Whittel, we're grateful. Please have a good day. Thank you for joining us on this conversation. There you have it. We've been discussing the legal angle, the societal. This is a subject that's embedded. This is something that we live with. And it is our hope and prayer that even as this tragic incident has happened, it will open our eyes and we will move away from incidents such as these. This is not good at all. Doesn't say any good thing about us as an entire country. This is not a video that came from a little community in the north. This is something that's representing Ghana as a country. Anyone that sees it on the net will know where it is coming from. And we shouldn't allow ourselves to do this.
Yeah. So the whole point is that it represents us. And
Exactly.
if this is what is going to represent us, and that's not a good feeling at all, good reputation. No. Well, that's where I guess all of us who are very much in tune with this subject would also want to get interactive, and make sure you do that on our various social media platforms. But next we have to tackle a sport that we all love. We're talking football, but this time the English Premiership came to a head or a wrap over the weekend. That was on Sunday. It was an exciting time, at least for those teams that nearly didn't qualify for Europe. They did. For the Champions League, and those that stayed for Europa too were there. But want to do some analysis of this. Where are we taking football, and not only European football, but also local football? And we have some good guests too.
Yeah, we do. We've got our own Gary Al Smith and Fifi Anaman and Jerome Autry, because we want this conversation to also link to our own local league. What have we learned from what we've seen with the project restarts? That's a conversation that's coming up next. Stay with us.